Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked to Fly Fishing. And today I thought we'd take another look at the issues of distance casting. And this time we're looking at how fly line taper and flies and fly head weight, the fly line head weight, all impacts our ability to cast far. And how we can make bad choices and end up not getting a very good result. And this is just a matter of matching things up and understanding what's happening. So let's get started and look at what I got here. I've got 4 lines meant for different applications, and we can talk about sort of a typical taper, an average taper, versus something that's a specialty taper designed for particular situations and flies and what have you. I've got this Airflow Exceed. It's a typical 8-weight a line that you would use as a sort of general purpose thing. I normally use it for my carp fishing. Works just fine, and it does a great job. Over here, I've got a 6-weight bass line. It's the Kelly Galoop. I shouldn't say call it bass line. It's a Kelly Galoop streamer line, but it's basically the same as a bass line. And it's designed for throwing typical streamers for either bass or trout. And here I've got 2 saltwater lines. This is a 9-weight cold water sniper line, and this is a 10-weight version. So, okay, what's the deal here? Well, you look at the flies I've got here. I've got these monster pike flies. I've got the saltwater fly, this bass fly, and a couple of Atlantic salmon flies. Look at the size of the difference here. Now, think about this. If I was to use this fly with this Airflow Exceed 8-weight, do you think I'd get a very good result out of it? Well, not really. I mean, I could get it some distance out of it, but probably around 40, 50 feet it's going to fall out of the air and it's not going to go any further. There's just simply not enough mass in the head of this fly line to generate enough kinetic energy to drive this thing through the air. It's as simple as that. You won't turn it over, you won't drive it very far. I mean, yeah, it's an 8-weight, it can move it, but you're not going to get a great deal of distance on a fly of this size. It's even worse when you come to this one. This one's got some rabbit on it. When rabbit gets wet, it's like casting a sock, a wet sock. I mean, you need something, some real serious fly line to power this. So, this Airflow Sniper, 10-weight. It has a head weight of 425 grains, and that's over 30 feet. Head's only 30 feet long, packs in 425 grains. Now, that's getting close to a 14-weight on the AFTMA scale. So, and this is considered a 10. And yes, it casts just fine on a standard 10-weight rod. But what this is doing is taking, in effect, a distance line that's maybe 55, 60 foot long, the weight of that distance line, and packing it into 30 feet. And because of that concentration of mass, it can cast a fly like this with absolutely no problem whatsoever. You can send this thing on its way, and it's like casting a trout fly. I mean, there's so much mass in the head of this line, and the taper's not very long. It's only 6 feet, and the tip is thick. You put all that together, and this will drive that fly like you wouldn't believe. Now, imagine if I had, instead of putting a big pike fly, I put this little Atlantic salmon fly in this line. What would happen? Well, because of the amount of energy that's in that line, the kinetic energy in that line, as it rolls out, it needs the drag of a big fly like this to pull the energy out of it, to suck the energy out of it. Because if you can't do that, what happens, it does what we call a head crash. There's so much energy in it that as it rolls out, there's too much energy still there, and the front end of the fly line and the leader goes all over the place. So yeah, at shorter distances, 60, 70 feet, it'll roll out nice and smoothly. But you start trying to push a fly line like that using a tiny little Atlantic salmon fly, you get around 80 feet, crash. It needs a big fly, big high drag fly to suck the energy out of it so it rolls out nice and smoothly. So you'll get 80, 90, 100 feet out of it with a big fly. Put a little fly on, boom, crash, 70 feet, 80 feet, you're done. You're not going to get any further. It's, yeah, with if you get really, really, really just on the edge and just close, you might get it out further. But I mean, in normal fishing where we're concentrating on the fishing, not the casting, it's unrealistic to expect a line like this to roll out nice and smoothly. We'd be much better off with a line like this Exceed. This was what I would be using with Atlantic salmon, would be with that fly, would be this Exceed. Lighter line, lighter head, closer to the AMFTA scale. It's just slightly overweight, and it's about, this is an 8 weight, so it's about an 8.5 weight, and it has a 7-foot front taper, nice and smooth rollout, a relatively thin tip. It'll handle that fly just fine. So I could expect easy distance out of this Exceed. I can easily get 80 feet out of it, 90 feet out of it, and it'll roll out nice and smooth, nice and straight, straighten out the leader, everything will be great. So here's the thing. This is the point I'm making with all of this, is I'm matching the fly line type, the weight of the head of the fly line, and the taper to the size of the fly I'm going to be casting and the situation I'm going to be casting in. So for example, in salt water, this fly is not that big, and yet I would still use this, Sniper 9 weight, intermediate 9 weight with this fly. And you're going to say to yourself, well, you're going to get head crashes and stuff like that. Well, yeah, I could. But less likely. This is a bigger fly than the Atlantic salmon ones, and the hook is fairly heavy. But the thing about this is often I'm dealing with windy conditions. So I may not have as big a fly as a pike fly, but I'm dealing with a lot of wind, and that's where this short, compact head, this is 375 grains over 30 feet. I mean, there's a lot of mass packed into a short head. Plus, it's intermediate as well, so it really cuts through the wind. So yeah, I can't get too gung-ho with it, but it'll handle a fly like this without too much trouble. But more importantly, it handles the wind, and that's where that energy is being used up, pushing that fly line through the wind. So I find that I can work with a line like this with a modest fly, and I'll still get decent results if it's windy and I'm dealing with the wind. Also, I have the opportunity to go to much bigger flies if I want to, which is great. If I want to step up to a big clouser, a big deceiver, or a big flatwing, no problem. They're gone. So, you can get away with, if you're dealing with high wind or that sort of situation, anything that's going to draw the energy out of the cast so the line rolls out smoothly is going to do the job for you. So when we're setting up to do, also the other thing I should mention before I go any further, if I wanted to use this fly with that line, that sniper line, and it was a calm day and there's no wind, what I could do to help draw the energy out of it is put a poly leader on it, put an intermediate poly leader on it, and then and add, say, 5 foot of tippet to the poly leader, and that thing will roll out nice and smoothly. The poly leader will help absorb the energy of the rollout. So going with the poly leader on a very blunt tapered line is one way we can actually smooth out the casting. We don't have to worry about that blunt taper. We can go for some extra distance thanks to this blunt taper. And I've got, out of the 8-weight version of this line on G. Loomis short stick, which is only 7.5 foot long, I got like 110 feet out of that. And the reason why I was able to do that is because I had a poly leader on it. Without the poly leader, there's no way. It was 70, 80 feet, it was done. But with the poly leader, it was enough mass at the end of it, enough drag at the end of it, that it sucked enough energy out that it kept the loop shape of the line together, enabling it to roll out smoothly, and I got excellent casts out of it. So if you have to use a blunt tapered line and you're going to be using a smaller fly in calm conditions, stick a poly leader on the end of it. Smooths it right out, and it makes it cast like a line with a longer front end. And it's almost like adding, I know these are considered part of your leader, but it's almost like adding taper to the front of the line. So it'll work just fine. Oh yeah, and I'm using the salmon steelhead version, the heavyweight version. I don't use the light trout ones. So that's a trick that you can use to take one of these blunt tapered lines and a small fly and make them cast well and cast quite far, quite smoothly. It's just by putting a 10-foot poly leader on the front to absorb the energy. And it works. So that's, I think, the bottom line that we've got to keep in mind here is that when we've got these super heavyweight, very compact tapered lines, like all the manufacturers have some version of this. You've got these very short-headed lines, very thick, very heavy. You're either going to be using a big fly with them, or casting into really serious wind, or, as I say, stick a pilot leader on the front of them. But you have to use something that's going to absorb that energy, or you're going to get into head crashes. And those head crashes are just going to pile stuff up, and it's going to look ugly. So, keep that in mind. You've got to match the fly to the line. And if you're working with smaller flies, you're working more with a standard line like the Succeed. You don't need to go with these super heavy lines. You're making life difficult for yourself. So you can go down using a line that's closer to the standard, and it'll work just fine. But don't try to use those fine lines with this beastie. It isn't going to work. So you have to make sure your line is right for the job, and then you'll get the distance you need. Cheers.